Question is that the bill be now read the second time. The honourable member for Nelson.
Thank you, Mr President. I'm pleased to rise to speak just briefly on this bill. Thank you to the Leader of Government Business for mentioning the fact that this is a sensitive area that we are discussing and mentioning the supports available for people who may need to access them in relation to these matters if this brings things up. I appreciate that. It's absolutely lovely in the midst of times when we debate lots of difficult and contentious things here and things that we don't agree on, it's absolutely lovely to have a bill come through that is actually about fixing a fairly straightforward thing but a potentially painful thing, and we can all agree on it being the right thing to do and the straightforward thing to do, and we can make it happen. So that's how I see this bill. As the Leader described fully in her contribution, and I don't need to go into in detail, this is a bill that rectifies something that we probably didn't anticipate back in 2021 when the Commission of Inquiry Act was being amended at that time. And sometimes it's only after things have been put in place and then we see the practical impact of it in practice that we realise it has not quite worked properly and actually has become a problem for some people. And in this case, the people that it became a problem for are people who are already in incredibly vulnerable situations in relation to the Commission of Inquiry, people who had engaged with the Commission of Inquiry, often at great personal cost and sometimes harm, because they saw a greater purpose in doing that and assisted through their participation for the Commission of Inquiry to be a productive and positive tangible outcome and response to what we know has been various situations of systems failing children in this state. People who engaged in private sessions, I would think, would never have imagined when they did so that they would be prevented from accessing those records later. And we might not have anticipated that we'd run into that administrative barrier either. But certainly this is an issue that came up for me when I was assisting a constituent to do this very thing, and we ran into this barrier. And I would just like to put on the record here that in navigating that circumstance, the interactions we had with the department and the support that we were able to receive and to put in place and to proactively look at ways to solve and move forward was just exemplary, and it was really appreciated. However, it's now taken a bit longer than we might have hoped to get to this point because of various practical delays in our political environment, but here we are now. And this bill is before us. It's a straightforward one. It does what all of us would think was sensible, that if you have had a private session as part of a commission of inquiry, you would then be able to have access to those records later, should you wish. And that wouldn't require something as extreme as having to the department or the state archivist having to contact people you mentioned in those sessions to check with them that it was all right. Because of course you never would have anticipated that the people you may have mentioned would even know that you had been in those private sessions speaking about them and sharing your stories. And it's your information, and you can and should be able to do with it as you like, and hence the retrospective effect that's important here, backdated, because we have had the experience of the recent Commission of Inquiry, and this has been a barrier for people in relation to that. We need to fix that for them in retrospect, and then know that we've got it in place for any future commissions of inquiry that may again eventuate in Tasmania. Of course, protection of privacy is always a paramount consideration, and you can understand how the provisions that were put in place in 2021 had the positive intent of protecting privacy, but then also in practice put that above the barrier that was created for people to actually access the information that belonged to them, in fact. What I'm quite pleased about is that it appears the process for people to access this information once this bill hopefully passes and is implemented in practice. It's not going to be via the RTI system or via some cumbersome process, I believe. It's going to be a fairly straightforward request and then administrative dealing with that to provide access. So that's positive too. We know from the RTI report released just this week, Mr President, we don't want to further clog up our RTI system, and in fact in that report it was identified that a lot of the clogging up of the RTI system is people seeking personal records and personal information from our various government systems, and that RTI review report points to the need to create a different way for that to occur so it doesn't clog up our RTI system, and the fact that this is being dealt with separate to RTI is positive and aligns with the findings of that RTI review. That's probably all I'm needing to say on this bill. As I said, it's a straightforward one. It's fixing something that wasn't quite working properly to the detriment of people who were potentially quite vulnerable anyway, and it's so pleasing to see it now being rectified and positively providing for those people to not necessarily come up against the barriers that they have been facing till now. So thank you, Mr President. I support the bill.